Will, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Skunk Ape, Grassman, Yeti, Yeren, Almas, Yowie. Ape men have been seen all over the world and have been seen for a long time. There are tens of thousands of people who are willing to state on the record that they have seen them, if not hundreds of thousands. Yet these creatures are not recognized by science. There is actually an incredible amount of evidence, though, that supports their existence. Yet it is just ignored due to persistent and hard-nosed skepticism. There are countless videos of ape men, not simply the Patterson-Gimlin film. Since the availability of video recording technology has proliferated, there are so many more credible or at least passable videos which have come out in the last 2 decades which stand on equal footing with the Patterson film. For a long time, a major talking point against Sasquatch was the absence of game cam footage of the animal. But now, the most compelling video or photographic evidence is from game cams. 2 prominent examples being the 2007 Allegheny National Forest photo and the 2012 Alberta trail cam photo. While the increase in the availability of cameras coincides with a rise of manipulation of images, including Photoshop and CGI, that should be noted, although ironically I think it's much easier to detect computer-manipulated images from practical effects, or basically I think that it would be easier for an expert to point to manipulation CGI, something that could come now, than it would be to decipher if a man in a suit was there. Meaning that I think actually the chances of it being faked is just as common now as it would be back then, because the best faking method would be with practical effects. And I think that the massive supply of these videos, after a while, is starting to becoming imposing in the scale of evidence that they provide. There is also a massive collection of footprints. Due to the name of Bigfoot, these footprints are ubiquitous with the phenomenon. There are also prints of their bodies lying on the ground, and there's handprints. Many of these prints have dermal ridges or distinct lines which make up the finer details of toe prints. Dermal ridges are considered extremely difficult to fake, with fake plastic footprints or wood footprints or rubber feet making them. Many of these footprints are defined by weight distribution being uneven, like most footsteps made by mammals, rather than by an even pressed weight distribution as if they are made by a person trying to make the most visually perfect footprint that they could. The footprint cast, which remains the most convincing and notable, is the Bossberg, Washington cripple foot tracks of 1969, in which the left foot is deformed. There is also DNA evidence, often from hair samples and blood samples. These samples, once tested, usually come back as either close to human or human but with an error. One particular sample is the infamous Zaina, a 19th century Abkhazian woman who was mentally retarded. She is said to have been an Alamos, covered in hair, and lived on a farm, and was the victim of rape and produced children who were descendants of humans and Alamos who continue to exist with to this day and their successors. Her remains have been examined, and they are now become a source of immense controversy. These remains, according to DNA evidence, point to her being sub-Saharan African, but the controversy lies within the interpretation of that data, with skeptics and the woke or left-wing people saying that it's simply an example of extreme racism that these people considered a black woman an Alamos. But further examination points to her having a large amount of obscure, archaic admixture in the DNA. This is similar in the same way that modern groups of humans have an admixture of Neanderthals or Denisovans. Sub-Saharan Africans have non-modern human admixture from different groups as well, but little is known about that as opposed to the admixture from Neanderthals and Denisovans. This closeness in DNA undermines the reliability, though, of DNA evidence, so that these discoveries and the indifference to which they are met means that nothing short of a captured or preserved deceased specimen will be able to prove any kind of existence to the scientific community. The photographic, forensic, and DNA evidence is very convincing. If this were any non-primate, this evidence on its own would be enough for it to be scientifically accepted as an animal. But with all this evidence, I think this begs the question, is Bigfoot real? And if so, does anybody care? Well, the reality is that despite the convincing nature, pretty big problems with the idea that Bigfoot is real, or at least as real as a conventional animal species. People are consistently searching for it. I mean consistently searching for it in an area which often has a pretty large population density, aka the continental United States and southern Canada. While this area is not exactly like Singapore or downtown Tokyo, it's considerably more accessible compared to something like the Amazon, the Congo rainforest, the Northern Territory of Australia, or Antarctica. It's not that there are not remote parts of the American and Southern Canadian countryside that could support a great ape. It's that there's an entire subculture dedicated to trying to find Bigfoot and looking for him constantly. To put this into perspective, there have only been a handful of expeditions searching for something like the Mokele-mbembe, Mongolian death worm, or the Mapinguari. People of varying hiking and hunting ability are looking for Bigfoot not simply as some kind of expedition, but it's their hobby. It's not absurd for a handful of animals to not be found year after year. There are no doubts that escaped big cats go undetected in the United States, Britain, or Australia. The problem really comes when you run into both believing that there's a breeding population that would have to be in the hundreds to even the thousands, which would be going undetected despite people constantly searching for them. A handful could escape this constant searching, but I don't really think an established breeding population could. A breeding population can go to undetected if it's not being searched for regularly by these people. But the problem is that these two don't fit together. Some of the best examples of, say, misdiagnosed sightings, I think the things that people would be most likely seeing in that case are sightings of people in the woods, possibly homeless people that are living there that people see from a distance. And then there are sightings that could be bears on two legs walking around on 2 feet. Of course, those two explanations I think fit pretty well because we're talking about something which is known to science. Explanations that are popular that could fit within a scientific framework, those are relic populations of Neanderthal or Gigantopithecus. Neanderthals are the most popular scientific explanation given by cryptozoologists in Russia and China. The Alamus sightings seem a lot more human compared to the Sasquatch sightings of North America. And then you have the evidence of Zaina's DNA, if she's an archaic African, before Homo sapiens really arose, then that could fit into that kind of explanation pretty well. But outside of Zaina, Alamus females have been noted for trying to have sex with humans. So that also fits into that idea. And returning to North America, American cryptozoologists like the idea of Gigantopithecus, some kind of relic population of it, believing that it would be what would be Sasquatch, that it went over some kind of land bridge between Siberia and Alaska and ultimately ended up in North America. Gigantopithecus is a close relative of the orangutan, and so a lot of people think that that wouldn't fit, though, because it would have a similar morphology to orangutan, rather than the upright morphology more similar to a human being, which is described by the majority of people that see it. And so neither of these candidates, I think, actually do fit the Sasquatch phenomenon of the world and most of the mirroring phenomena, save, as I said before, the very human Alamus at times. Sasquatch, unlike those two examples, is a 6 to 9 foot tall bipedal ape rather than a knuckle walker, and rather unlike the small human-like Alamus. Again, was thinking about some alternate explanations. A lot of people who witness Sasquatch report strange phenomenon around him. The encounters which are associated with other associated anomalous phenomena like orbs or UFOs when people see Sasquatch. Well, Sasquatch do exhibit some pretty ape-like behaviors, throwing rocks. They also exhibit some pretty non-ape-like behaviors, things like communicating telepathically. And witnesses of them often fear irrational paranoid fear, which goes beyond something. If you saw, an alligator or a bear or a mountain lion trying to go after you, despite the animal being seen as less aggressive than common predators. And sightings of Sasquatch can be associated with missing time or unexplained gaps in perception and memory. It is here that we can find a synthesis in all these factors taken together and make sense if one sees Sasquatch and other ape man as a supernatural phenomenon coming from a physical being, a true monster with supernatural powers, or a possessed animal. If these animals are witnessed so much, it is because these true monsters, if you will, are truly physically there. People aren't simply seeing nothing. There really is a Sasquatch. Yet these creatures would be able to evade those who search for them, as their small number could be without the need to breed, and they could use supernatural ability to evade capture by humans. Likewise, the uncanny intelligence of these creatures could also be explained as being not truly human nor truly animal. The build of these creatures is extremely large and nimble, something that should not be so, as they seem to be more nimble and fast than humans are, despite their immense size, when they should be slower and clunkier. Well, perhaps it's because they are true monsters. They are truly supernatural animals. Of course, this explanation cannot be empirically tested in modern science, yet it fits so perfectly with what we know, and unlike the biological explanations, it is not weighed down by embarrassment when expedition after expedition comes up empty-handed. At the end of the day, though, we cannot know, and this is all conjecture. But I think it's pretty fascinating and fun conjecture nonetheless.